Right, your observations are now over. You should have some quality detailed notes, hopefully a clear idea of which assessment criteria you want to claim as well. But that's not it. You can't just submit that your notes as evidence, because by definition notes are purely for you and not for an observer, an IQA, or anybody else that's inspecting the records. Now, what we're on now, I'm on page 14 of that booklet, and I'm going to talk you through now what evidence that you're going to need to submit for your portfolio for your assessor course, and how we would present the evidence in a learner's portfolio. So, an observation record, also known as an observation report, is the actual piece of evidence that will go into a learner's folder. Now think of this record a bit like a receipt of everything that you have claimed for that candidate, why you are claiming it. It's really important to remember that. And another thing worth noting is having a clear idea who the target audience of this document is. Who is it aimed at? Is it for our learners? Well, not really. Yes, of course, learners like to know what they've passed, but they don't necessarily... They just want to know what they've passed, really. A tick box would suffice for a learner. It's not really meant for our learners. It's more meant for our internal quality assurance teams, and therefore the external quality assurance teams from the awarding body when they visit. Because what you as an assessor have to do is, when requested, prove why you are claiming certain criteria and certain units. Your IQA will say, right, what I'd like to do today, please, is everybody that's been working on Unit 29, could I have a copy of your folders, please, because I want to check the evidence for Unit 29, please. That sort of request will come in, and it's down to you to provide them with that information. And this document is not something Brooks & Kirk made up again. This is kind of a universally understood template, and it's set out in the way it is to make it easy for those other people to find the information that they want to find quickly. So that section's self-explanatory. I shouldn't have to go through that. Unit numbers and title. Numbers, again, plural, because as assessors we do work across many units at the same time. Description of activity undertaken. Now this is a summary, a synopsis of what was happening in that observation. Just set the scene, explain in a paragraph what it is that was happening. So, I don't know, let me give you an example. An observation of Tom, where he was responsible to make outbound calls to check student progress. Tom was also required to receive incoming calls when the phone was not available for other people to pick up. Something like that. A few sentences, a paragraph, just setting the scene and explaining what happened. If you are assessing learners doing similar things, don't think that you can just purely copy and paste the previous descriptions, because whilst they're maybe doing something similar, they weren't doing the same sort of jobs or tasks or activities. So do make sure that they're unique. Now, assessment and grading criteria. In this box, this is where you, the assessor, have to list the criteria that is passed by this document being in their portfolio. Only what is passed. Do not think this document is an opportunity to give feedback and development feedback, formative feedback. It isn't. This is purely a receipt presenting what is passed. Before you can actually do that and list your criteria, you'll find it better if you complete this section next, because this is where you take your notes and you start telling the story in chronological order as it happened during your observation, and you start presenting the facts. It's really important to remember to include as many adjectives and adverbs as possible, because it's those adjectives and adverbs that truly paint that picture of competency. So, for example, the phone was repeatedly answered in confidently. The confidently is the adverb, and that makes it, an adverb describes the verb, and it helps paint that picture of competency. So do make sure you add plenty of detail and justification as to why you're thinking that criteria was passed. So let me give you an example. I observed Tom retrieve voicemails on his phone. He had to follow the procedure by dialing blah blah blah, and Tom was immediately prompted to enter the voicemail box password. Whilst Tom was doing this, it looked natural. Those are the sorts of details that help paint the picture. And at the end, once you've written a statement like that, you put in brackets next the criteria that you're passing as a consequence. So let me give you another example. Tom used the database system he was using, the learner management system, to find learners to find customers that he needed to call. He then took that number, typed it into his handset to make the call, full stop. Well, that one was to do with, that example was being able to make a call. So that one, 2.2. So at the end of that sentence, that paragraph that I just gave you there as an example, you can put in brackets unit, what unit number is it again? Unit 29, so put U29 AC 2.2 in brackets, done. And you'll carry on through your list until you've basically got a large passage of text. Please do not expect this to be a small document. Obviously, this box will grow as you start telling your story, but it's really important to bear that in mind. Another thing worth noting: don't be tempted to write a large paragraph and then claim 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria in a large paragraph. And the reason is again to do with the target audience. Okay. Now your IQAs, your internal quality assurers, will have a little job on their hands. If they're sampling unit 2.4, if they've got a massive whacking great big paragraph relating to 5 or 6 different criteria, are they going to be able to find easily 2.4 within that paragraph? No. Well, that's exactly why you do it in little tiny chunks and put one criteria at a time. If there are 2 identical or very similar criteria in across many different units, then that's absolutely fine. You could do very, very similar criteria, but I don't think there are any in the context of these 2 units that you were working with. So yeah, stick to doing one statement and claiming one criteria at a time. And then it will kind of make sense why you do this section first before you then do that, because all you have to do is skim read your own work when you're proofreading it for spelling, punctuation and grammar, and then tally up all the units and assessment criteria you claimed in brackets, so you'll have a nice big list, hopefully in this section. Please make sure you sign it as well, that would be excellent. So hopefully that's a good explanation, enough of an explanation for you to be able to complete your observation reports, your observation records. You'll need to do one for each candidate, and of course they will be completely different, so don't feel that there's any possibility of being able to cut corners with Control-C for copy and Control-V for paste. You can't do that for this, so don't think there's any opportunity to do that. Right. So if we have a look here underneath this section, this is acceptable. Okay. This is not. And the reason why that's not acceptable, well, for many reasons. 29 cabbages. Well, there's no context. So you need to put unit or U. You can use unit, that's better. 21 to 23. Well, you can't contract in this document at all. And it comes down to, yet again, the skim readers in the room. When your IQAs are skimming your document, and they want to find 2.2, it won't appear if you've contracted it, so don't do any sort of contractions. Okay, so this would be failed. This whole paragraph would be failed. It's claiming too many outcomes. Now, this section here would definitely be failed. Your IQA will pull you up immediately if you're doing this sort of thing. I'm sure you won't. There's quite a few reasons why. I'll just give you a moment to have a read through it and come up with answers in your own mind why you think that's failed. So, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, but if you're an assessor, you need to be modelling what is effective spelling, punctuation and grammar. So look, proper nouns without capitalisation, that's obviously not acceptable. You wouldn't expect that from your learners. Spelling mistakes, you need to make a reasonable effort to reduce spelling mistakes. Just, simple things. Also worth noting, spelling and grammar aside, where's the information here? He represented the organisation in a way that meets the company's required standards. Well, what are the company's required standards? State them. I observed him follow consistently this process. He did this first, followed by that. This was done consistently across the 9 different phone calls I observed. That's the sort of meat that needs to be in an observation report. You can't just regurgitate the criteria from the spec, shove it in an observation report, and that will pass, because you might as well just have a tick box and submit a load of tick sheets if that's the case. So that's me talked enough about the observation records. Now, the following set of documents you're going to need to submit as evidence is work product reference forms. Now, this document is a bit like an index page. So what will happen is those screenshots or whatever evidence, work product evidence you requested your learners to submit, once we've proof checked them to make sure everything has been appropriately redacted, we will email them on to you. But they won't be sorted. They won't be identified as what criteria is passing or anything. That's your job. Your learners are not expected to do your job for you. So, you've got to take whatever they give you, and then it's down to you to present to the awarding body what has been passed and why. And this is the function of this form. If you think of it like a paper-based folder and say there's 5 screenshots in it, the learner's just printed off 5 screenshots for you. Fantastic. You'd have those 5 screenshots in a plastic wallet, and then this form above those screenshots just presenting what it is that they are. So you put the unit number for that piece of evidence. You'll do one of these rows for each piece of evidence there is. Unit number, outcomes, again, because it can hit more than one. Assessment criteria. Yeah. Now, file name, page number, index number, it can be any one of these 3. If they email you a digital document, then you simply record the file name of that specific item, whether it was picture1.jpg, Untitled 3, whatever they've called it, or they might be really helpful and put unit 29 3.2 dot email, whatever. So your learners might be really helpful in giving you good page good file names, but if not, tough. It's your job really to deal with it. If you were, say, marking a huge assignment, then you would put a page number that piece of evidence reflects. Or if they submit a whole portfolio of evidence after a month and they've already page numbered most of it for you, you can link where that page number is located. Index number, same sort of thing. If they have a folder, paper-based folder with 28 plastic wallets in, they might index each plastic wallet of some kind. So think of this like your receipt index. Description of work product, a couple of sentences here, describe what it's showing you. That's basically it really. So again, you'll submit one for each learner of these. And it'll look something like that eventually. Obviously much more filled in. Okay, final thing now. We have packaged together a little tick list, if you like working on tick lists, and that's great. But we've discussed now up to here. And the final thing you're going to need to submit, so that we've got enough evidence to claim your Unit 2 for your assessor qualification, is a reflective account. Now, for some of you, reflective accounts, are second nature, especially those in a teaching profession. You're just bombarded to do reflection after reflection. For those that aren't, don't worry. There is a guide in the Unit 2 section titled A Guide to Reflective Practice, with a series of recommendations and steps, like a method that you could kind of go through to help you format this. But if you follow this guide that I'm going to explain to you now, you can't really go far wrong. So you're going to need to have 3 sections, A, B, C. So create them as nice big headings. So section A is all about your performance as an assessor whilst you were assessing. So you might want to do some sort of SWOT analysis or breakdown. I believe one of my strengths was utilising technology really well. I was able to communicate effectively without the technology being a barrier. A weakness of mine might potentially be that I didn't collect enough notes during the observation. Opportunities to develop that further would be to practice further and ensure that I collect more adjectives and adverbs whilst observing. A threat for me would be that if we don't do this, we might not get as many outcomes complete for our learners, and that might be putting them at a disadvantage. So that's an example I've just given you. You could do a table containing some SWOT analysis, but please do write in the first person. So a reflection about your performance, whether it's during standardization, when you're making those decisions, how well you communicated with the learner, how you did your introduction. There's so many different things you could possibly talk about. Is there anything that you could think, yeah, I might do that a bit differently in the future? So that's section A. Good few paragraphs would be great here, for sure. Large paragraphs, of course. B. You've got to explain to the examiner about your occupational competency. So title this section Occupational Competency in My Sectors. If you've got more than one sector, then obviously that's plural. If you are a health and social care assessor, but you stop working in health and social care for 3 or 4 years and then want to start assessing some level 3s, would you be deemed occupationally competent? I don't know. That's what you've got to do here. You've got to kind of answer these sorts of questions. What mandatory training must you do to keep current in your sector? Have you got to be registered with a certain body? Like for nursing, for example, you have to be a registered nurse to be deemed occupationally competent. Are there any subject-specific training that you're interested in? Have you got to do safeguarding once a year? Have you got to do manual handling once a year? Whatever that looks like. Present this section assuming the examiner knows nothing about your subject area. Just present. This is your chance to shine and show off and explain what it is that you can do to remain current in your area of expertise. Now the same applies as an assessor. So section C is titled Occupational Competence as an Assessor. So once qualified, if you don't assess or use your assessor qualification for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and have got no CPD, would you be deemed occupationally competent? Well, the chances are perhaps not. So what I would like you to do here is kind of present the things that you can do, will do, hopefully, to remain current as an assessor. And I know this is a bit difficult because for lots of people they're not qualified assessors yet, so how would you know? Well, that's why I've helped you with 5 sections that you could explore. That's 5 paragraphs I can give you there free of charge for you to talk about. So, Social media, very powerful tool, can be especially useful within an assessor role. I'm not really talking about Facebook for, cat videos or anything like that. No, it's not what I'm on about. Professional social media could be things like LinkedIn. Yeah, I know some people don't use LinkedIn appropriately, but if utilised well, it's a great tool, especially for people seeking employment, and I'll explain. In a LinkedIn profile, you kind of put your occupation, qualifications, recent contracts, recent experiences, very much in the same kind of way as you would a CV. And the way LinkedIn makes money is by charging employers and employment agencies a fee to search their database for prospective clients. And if you have got one individual whom is probably in between contracts, starting to get rather active in that health and social care assessor group, or starting to get really active within the within a specialist assessor group, and really showing their stuff off, employers do look and see, oh God, who's this guy? He seems to know what he's on about. Can we can we see if he's available for some work? There is genuine opportunities there. So just present a paragraph as to how social media could be a really useful tool as an assessor, and there is nothing stopping you from diarising a couple of hours, a quarter or whatever, to say, right, I'm going through these sites, and I'm going to do some CPD, and I'm going to write a little report of the findings, and you can actually put this down as some CPD hours for you if you want. It's really useful. So, next section, you could write a paragraph about the support that your internal quality assurers could offer you within your centre that you're going to work with or working with. It'd be nice to think all IQAs are the same. I know they're not, but they kind of should be, because they're all trained, one would hope. I'm not asking for, the key roles and responsibilities as an IQA and for you to produce a 2-page document on that, because that is actually task 2 of the IQA course. I'm not asking for that, but a good paragraph just explaining the sort of stuff an IQA should be there to assist you with will be great. Next section, the function of standardisation meetings. Explain why that's useful. Do a paragraph on that. Link it in with your standardisation assignment that you did if you've completed that already. Fourth bit, there might be formal qualifications that you think, do you know what? Yeah, I'm seeing this being touted in lots of job sites that they'd like people to have an education training qual, for example. So, yeah, do you know what? Do a little bit of research and see if there's any further training around the subject. If you want to be a teacher, do you need any teaching quals, etc., etc.? And finally, if you don't know about this now, this is your opportunity, because endpoint assessment is live. The new apprenticeship standards are here. They're going to be here to stay. Some of the old frameworks are kind of running out. We do actually have a free webinar that I think you can enroll on. Let me just see if I can find that for you. So let's just do that now. Endpoint. So you can go on this page and enroll onto the free webinar on demand. So if you don't know much about endpoint assessment, get on that, jump straight on that immediately, and then write a paragraph as to how endpoint assessment is really important. Okay, and just a few paragraphs on that in its own right demonstrates that you as an assessor are keeping up to date in the role, because obviously it's an ever-changing world that we live in. Right, so in conclusion, I've just explained to you how to complete the observation reports. I've just explained the function and purpose of that work product reference sheet, and I've also gone through the reflection. You should now have everything that you need to produce the evidence. All the documents for what you need to submit are located within the Unit 2 Evidence Requirements task. So click on there to download those documents, and hopefully that, along with this video, should give you everything you need to complete your relevant paperwork. I know there's a lot to submit as part of this one submission for Unit 2 Evidence Requirements. Just to manage your expectations, it's not likely that you're going to pass it first time. I'd like to think it is, but don't get yourself hung up and a bit disappointed if you have to tweak a report here or there. That's absolutely expected. Nobody's perfect. Even assessors with years worth of experience sometimes need a bit of development in their observation reports, let's say. So yeah, please don't take it personally if there's a slight modification to do. And I hope this has been useful. Thank you.